So the LO for today, learning objective, I can explain the differences between the rich and poor of Roman civilians. Because civilians is the normal people in Rome. Okay, so last lesson we looked at the slaves in Rome, but now we're going to look at the normal Roman civilians. Okay, you don't have to do that later. Roman citizenship. Remember we looked at manumission from the last lesson? We looked at how a slave can get its freedom and become a Roman citizen. Okay, a citizen is a person of Roman citizenship. Okay, so in the rest of society, Roman people who were not slaves, weren't slaves, could be granted Roman citizenship if they were considered worthy. A soldier who had served for many years, so this soldier here, he is a Roman citizen. Roman citizenship brought privileges such as the right to vote, unless you're a woman, the right to a lawful marriage or a fair trial. So if you're a Roman citizen, you could vote who is the leader. Okay? So leader of the people of Rome, unless you were a Roman. So in these days, women were not seen as equal to men, so they could not vote. The rich, so that they could get married, people can get married if you're a Roman citizen, and a fair trial. A fair trial you see in courts. So if you're a Roman citizen, you can have a fair trial, innocent until proven guilty. No Roman citizen could ever receive the death penalty unless they were found guilty of treason. So if you're a Roman citizen, you could not receive the death penalty unless they were found guilty of treason. Treason is against the empire, so something against the empire. If they plotted to kill an emperor or someone of political influence. So treason is something against, let's say, the king or the queen nowadays. So against that country, basically. Women and girls. So women and girls were not seen as being equal to men and boys. In fact, women and girls were only treated a little better than slaves. So this was 2,000 years ago, okay, in Roman times. So they weren't treated that nicely, okay? So in Roman society, the amount of freedom you had as a woman was decided by your wealth and who was your father or husband. If you had a rich father who was very important, you could have a lot of freedom as a woman. Or a husband who was very important, you could have a lot of freedom if you're married to him. Free women were classed as Roman citizens, but didn't have the rights of a full citizen, like for voting. For example, they weren't allowed to vote or become involved in politics. So if you're a woman, you could be a citizen, but you didn't have the full rights like men did, like the right to vote or involved in politics. Women were given, so the normal women were given a very basic education. So just read and write, maybe, but that's it. And were expected to take a traditional role in the household. So doing jobs such as preparing and cooking the meals, making clothes, and raising any children. So remember, these Roman citizens could not afford slaves. So the women did all the household work. Okay, like cooking, making clothes, and raising any children. They lived under the authority of their father or husband at all times. They always had to listen to the man. Okay? So either the father or the husband at all times. So these were the different homes in Roman times. So look up here, the first one. Poor Romans in the countryside lived in small villages of wooden huts with thatched roofs. These were made out of woods. Okay, these were poor Romans. Remember, not all Romans were equal. Okay, some were rich, some were poor. So these were what Romans lived in if they were poor. This here is a Roman villa. It was a very luxurious estate for rich Romans in the countryside. Usually in the countryside, so these walls were used for protection. Okay? Poor Romans in towns. This was in the countryside. This was in the towns. Poor Romans in towns and cities live in an insula. So it's like apartment blocks now, but in worse condition than we see today. Apartments. Okay? They weren't very clean, they were dirty. Okay? So these were called insulae. Insulae. So this was in the towns, the poor Romans. This was in the countryside. Okay? Here we see a domus, or the type of house in the city in which a rich Roman would have lived. So you can see all the walls around the house for protection. You can see a little pool here. Okay, so these were very luxurious, very expensive. So these rich Romans usually had slaves to run the house. Okay, if they had a big house like this, they usually had a lot of slaves. Okay, to do all the cooking and washing and cleaning. So the women here would be better off than the women here, because the women here would have to cook and clean. Here they wouldn't. The slaves would do all that. Okay. So the jobs, farmers. So the different jobs in Roman times. Farmers. Roman farmers used to grow lots of wheat as it would be used to make bread. Merchants. Merchants were people who sold and bought things from around the empire. They helped to make the empire rich. So merchants traveled from one part of the empire to another. They bought and sold things, and they helped trade, so bring everything around the empire. They usually did this with ships and roads. The roads we've seen the Roman soldiers made. Seen that in the first lesson or the second lesson. So they helped to travel all the goods around the empire. Craftsmen. Craftsmen were skilled people who would create items. These could range from fine jewelry to pots and weapons for the empire. Craftsmen were seen as very important. Next, soldiers. Many poor people chose to become soldiers as it guaranteed a regular wage and were given lands once they finished their 25-year service. So soldiers could not sign up for 1 year. It was for 25 years. Okay, so it was a long time. Okay, so they always got paid, and once they finished the 25 years, they could get land to grow crops. Lawyers, teachers, and engineers. Educated Romans could do these jobs. Do you know all these jobs from today? Entertainers. These included actors, musicians, dancers, chariot racers, and gladiators. Remember, gladiators were usually slaves. Okay, so these were all other jobs. Government. This included many jobs such as clerks and tax collectors. It also included senators. Senators were high-ranking and were very rich and powerful. So senators were very important. Remember, the people could vote. Roman citizens could vote for senators, because these were in charge of Rome and its empire. Okay, so these are very important people. So if you're a Roman citizen, you can vote for senators to become leaders of the city and, in fact, the empire. Okay. Okay, so we're going to look at plebeians here now. So plebeians were the working class. They generally lived in very crowded, basic apartments. You seen there at the start where they lived in apartments. Plebeians were seen as very poor. Most plebeians were soldiers, farmers, bakers, builders, or craftsmen. They were also usually Roman citizens. So they had Roman citizenship, but they were just poor. So these were called plebeians. Patricians. So patricians were the rich. Patricians were at the top of Roman society. They were the ruling classes and were always Roman citizens. Patricians were very wealthy and made up a very small percentage of Roman society. So remember, there was a lot more poor, which were plebeians, than there were patricians. Okay, these people could trace their ancestry back to founding of Rome, so they know that they are the ruling class, they ruled Rome. So these usually became senators and stuff like that. The emperor and senates. Emperor controlled the Roman Empire and had a very luxurious life with the best of everything. This was an emperor here. He was advised by the senates, who were a group of men, senators, made up of the wealthy upper classes from powerful families. So Rome had an emperor, this man. He was advised by the Senate, which is made up of senators. Okay? So the senators were voted by the Romans, were voted to be in the Senate by the Roman citizenship, citizens. Okay, so the people of Rome voted for senators to be in the Senate to advise the emperor. Okay, I know it's very complicated. So the senators were usually wealthy, okay, in forming the ruling classes. Being a senator was a very prestigious and highly respected position. Prestigious is important. Once you became a senator, you had the position for the rest of your life because you were always in the Senate. Foods. The Romans ate 3 meals a day. Lots of their diet was similar to food we have today. In fact, many of the fruits and vegetables we know were brought to Britain by the Romans. So here we see some breakfast. You don't need to know that. Okay, so it was kind of breads, pancakes, dates. So dates kind of fruits and honey. So for lunch, they would have fish, cold meat, bread, vegetables. The cena, which is the evening meal. Poor Romans would eat vegetables and porridge. The rich Romans would eat a banquets and drink wine. So the poor and rich Romans they ate different foods. Yeah, the rich usually had wine and lots of food, while the poor people didn't have as much food. So they usually eat vegetables and porridge. Okay. Yeah, so this was the rich Romans' food. As the empire conquered more areas, the Romans were able to enjoy the foods from these countries too. The rich Romans would have a huge banquets, which was feasts, and eat exotic foods to show off their wealth. So they usually brought these foods from conquered lands and bring it back to Rome and have big feasts, okay, from all these different places. Some of the most extravagant, so special parties served peacock, stuffed dormouse, roast parrot, and milk-fed snails. Okay, so all these different kind of foods were brought back to Rome. For a banquet or a feast, the Romans would eat almost lying down. They would spread out on couches around a low table. Banquets lasted for several hours. Okay, so you can see all the luxurious food here. Okay, so they usually last for hours. Okay. So I want you to explain the differences between the rich and poor in Roman society. So I want you to do the screen run. So explain two differences from each side and evaluate who had a better life. Example, the poor, the rich. So the poor, so which was better? So the rich was better. Okay, I'll tell you that now. I want you to write it down on a piece of paper. So when we're looking at Roman society, is society the same today? If you can see here, is there any differences in society today? You can see these are the ruling classes of Britain, and here's the working class. Although it is different now. Women can vote now, which is better. Women can have an education. Okay, it's not as bad as Roman times, but there still is a ruling class around the world, which kings and queens of Europe are still around. So this is Queen of England. Okay, so there still is differences in society with rich and poor. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoy my lesson. Bye.